I thought it was Paul and Barb rocking out in the council chambers.
I think it's Tom.
Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You want to take the roll call?
Mike Hobson,
Here.
Marilyn Early,
Here.
Deborah Nelson,
Here,
Don Vanny,
Here.
Anne Shreddy,
Here,
Jessica Stickles,
Here.
Michelle Blythe.
here.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Second.
Question?
Favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Be opposed? Okay, so we'll jump right into our first workshop item this evening, which is establishing a resolution establishing the city as a public aircraft operator. Chief Ventura.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'm in my car, so we are looking for a resolution of support for the council for the police department to begin operating a drone program. By way of history, we've been beta testing a drone program for about the last year. The main use that we have used with the drone is to provide overwatch and security when tracking suspects with our canines. Our canine officer has worked with Getchell Fire. The deputy chief or assistant chief up there is Jeremy Stalker. He's also a reserve officer for our department. And he is a FAA certified licensed UAS pilot, and that's a unmanned aerial systems pilot. And so he has been very kind to help us with our beta testing. He has an interest in setting up the SOPs and the training program. He's working with a lot of other agencies in the county. He's kind of our county's foremost expert in the area. Some areas that we see that this technology would be helpful to the police department is obviously what we have been using it for. We've had some great successes. We've also had some uses for search and rescue applications. And a big area that I see us potentially expanding to in the future is for measuring and photographing collision scenes. So for example, right now, when we go to a major injury collision, it's not untypical for us to have to close down the road for 3 to 4 hours while we take photos and do measurements. And what we have found is the technology and the software has improved so much with the drones themselves. Many agencies are going to using drones to take measurements from the air and photos from the air, potentially being able to open up some of those scenes as quick as 20 to 30 minutes versus the 3 to 4 hours that we have now. So moving forward in this process, it would require us to have FAA licensed pilots, and they would have to go through a training regiment and program. And this is all overseen and kind of guided by FAA rules and regulations. So in this last year that we've had this program, we've been in touch with the airport, and so they've been a good partner to us in helping develop the program. And we've had applications near and around the airport, and we continue to consult with them on a regular basis on what that looks like to make sure we're keeping everybody safe for the air traffic and for our operators and our officers as well. So the next step for us in this process is basically to make a program official. We would launch our own SOPs, our own training program, and provide notification to the FAA that we are seeking to begin an official program. And in order to do that, it would be very helpful to have the council support in that. And we would like to take the next step in making application to the FAA. So we're seeking approval tonight. I'm calling from my car, and I apologize. I asked Jeremy Stalker to see if he could zoom in for questions. And I don't know if he was able to make it or not. He had some conflicts, but I'll stand for questions and do my best if he's not online.
I have one question. I know we have drones, private drones that are around. What's the distance at the airport that we have to stay away from? I mean, besides the runway itself, how far does it stretch out? Do you know?
That would be a good question for the airport. I don't know. I'm not the expert on that. I do
Okay.
apologize. We have actually operated on the airport property, so there are rules and regulations that we follow that will allow us to operate at the airport. But that's special circumstances for us being public safety. I know that hobby operators have to stay a considerable distance away from the airport. I can follow up with you and get you that answer. I'm not that familiar with the exact distance.
Oh, that's okay. I can ask Dave. I was just curious.
Dave and
if-
Dave and Marty will know.
3-mile radius around the airport for the hobby drones.
For the hobby. So this would probably be a little different.
Yeah,
With
this
the
would be
police.
licensed by the FAA.
Oh, okay.
It would
Thank
work in coordination with the airport management notification.
Okay, thank
Carolyn,
you.
I saw you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I really support this. I think it would be a very valuable asset. I have personal experience with a relative that was in a dangerous situation in a wooded area in her home, and through the sheriff's department, they were able to use a drone and the canine unit to track this person down and arrest him. Otherwise, she may have been, killed or harmed in some way. So you got my 100% support.
Thank you.
Michelle and then Mike.
Yeah, this was really interesting to me. I called a family member that we have that's in the police force and asked him if they use it. And he said, we've been using it for a few years, doesn't everybody? And I said, well, not yet, but I asked him like some of the benefits, and he said he was just sharing the amount of benefits and safety for officers or individuals, like in Maryland's example. But can you imagine going into a rural area and being able to fly a drone through it first to see if somebody is armed and dangerous? I think it's a great safety feature for your officers out there, and I support this also. I think it's a great resource for you to have in your department.
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually some California agencies that have 24-hour around-the-clock drone operations that they will actually send a drone to low priority calls before even dispatching an officer. So I think that's the wave of the future. We got a long ways to go, but I see that coming.
And he's in California, so that's, I guess, the question. Doesn't everybody?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just for reference, Washington State Patrol is the largest government user of drone technology. So even within our own state, a majority of state troopers have drones within their cars for different purposes.
Yeah.
Mike, did you have a question?
Yeah, I did. I also think this would be an extremely valuable tool for the police. I am wondering about, are there measures that are in place to be sure that they are not used in an inappropriate way? In other words, that somebody could take the drone and start spying on other people in town, that sort of stuff, unsolicited sort of behavior. And I'm just wondering if there are specific laws or regulations that would prevent that kind of abuse.
Well, there's first off, that there are laws that prohibit that, flying over people and then personal property. But even just at the department level, we will have our own policies that will dictate when the drone can be put into effect. Anybody who will operate it will have to go through our program and be familiar with our policies and procedures. They'll have to go through a unique training program. They'll have to obtain the FAA licensing. I know that privacy is a big issue, and I can assure you we don't have the manpower or the time to be flying around peeping in windows. Really, it's going to be used mission specific. Like I said, if we're tracking a suspect or if we're measuring an accident scene, we're looking for a lost person. If there was some kind of surveillance operation, we would have to apply for the proper legal authority and warrants to use it in that capacity. But that would be the minimal use for us, and that's probably sometime down the road, if at all. Our main issue right now is officer safety and accident scenes and looking for missing people. So there are protections there. I'm happy to provide you. Right now we have a draft policy, and I'm happy to send you a copy of that tomorrow that outlines some of what your concerns and touches on those areas.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
And we'll do that.
Go ahead, Deborah.
Okay, thank you. I can't hear you very well tonight, Barb. I would be interested in seeing that too. That was one of my concerns, Jonathan, was
Sure.
about the privacy and accountability of the officers that will be assigned to using them, you know, for their behavior with them. Not that I expect any problems, but we always need to be careful. What I'm interested in is if you have an idea of what this is going to cost the citizens of the city. Is this a 2021 budget request? Is it a 2022? What is the long term, you know, every year then on out? What is it going to, you know, what addition is that to the city? Another $50,000 to the police budget? Or, you know, I'm just curious about that. And then will certain officers be assigned to this type of duty, or will everybody be trained with it? And then I'm thinking accountability too. So what if they crash a drone? You know, they're not cheap. I know they're cheaper than what they used to be, but I'm just kind of concerned about the financial side of it for the cost.
If I can tag on to Deborah's question about the financial side, because it'll tie in. In the CAB, it said that this can significantly reduce operational expenses. And I was just wondering if you could point to us where we could look to follow that to see if it does.
Good.
Right. Well, the reduction in operational expenses is the overtime that would be called out to have officers measure and document serious injury collisions. So it is tangible, but it is harder to drill down those numbers because of the nature of those kinds of applications. The costs of the drones themselves, we already have a drone that we own, and it was purchased with drug seizure fund. So it's a smaller size, fit in your hand type of drone. For our beta testing, we were using another agency's drone, actually Getchell Fires, which they obtained originally on a grant, and that's a $40,000 drone. So I have no interest in going out and spending $40,000 on our own drone right now. That's something that we would look for grant opportunities in the future. The kind of drones that we're using right now that's to do collision scenes, if we were to crash one, the cost to replace that drone, if it was not covered by insurance, would be about $1,500. Some other expenses are the training aspect. We have a significant amount of unfunded training now, but the hours that we put towards that would go towards some of our other training requirements as the department. The cost for training an officer, part of the requirements for us is it could be expensive to train everybody in the department to do it. So I would rather put it out as an opportunity for the officers to gain new skills and new abilities and to show their level of commitment. What I would expect from an officer interested in the program is for them to obtain their Part 107 FAA certification on their own. If they were successful in obtaining that certification, which I understand could be quite intense, then we would reimburse that officer for the cost of the certification, which currently is about $120. So we could absorb that through our training costs right now currently. So once they obtain that Part 107 certification, then they would go through our own organized training regiment, and that would be under our UAS manager, which would be Jeremy Stocker, the gentleman that I was referring to before. So interesting enough, there have been some instances of drones coming down from the sky. And when it's a $40,000 drone and it happens to hit something in the street or a car, then yeah, there's unique concerns. That has to actually be reported to the FAA, and they have the option of doing their own investigation on something like that. So it would be for us in that type of situation, it would probably involve the insurance company and would be similar to right now as if one of our cars are involved in a collision. It would be no difference there. The liability would probably be equally as high, just a normal cost of doing business. But long term, I believe the mayor is correct that operationally, the time it saves for us, just like I said, being able to clear a serious collision scene in 30 to 40 minutes versus up to 4 hours would be significant. There could be some additional licensing costs. I know there was a question about accountability. One of the things that we will need to purchase is a software program that basically tracks all of our missions. So as far as accountability, every time that the drone is used on a mission, you would know exactly where that drone was flying through GPS coordinates. You would know the nature of the mission. You would know who was operating it and who else was available. So it'd be very transparent, very in line with liability and accountability. And part of that transparency is coming to you tonight and asking for this resolution so that you're on board with it, you know what's going on. And it's also a notification to the public. They kind of know that we've been beta testing for the fact that whenever we do a social media post, they tend to be very popular and people get excited when we're out chasing bad guys with drones and dogs. But so the public does have some familiarity with it as well. But this resolution is another layer of accountability that lets them know what we're doing. Does that answer your questions? I know you had like a 3-part question there.
Mostly it does. I think what I would be interested in the future, as you put together the actual funding of this model of policing is tying in with what Barb brought up is it would just be interesting to me so that the citizens see that, yes, maybe we're putting monies in this direction of the drone, but we're saving over here. So I don't know if there's a way in your budget for the next couple of years to show how this is balancing out. And I think it would be a good education for the public. And also it's a good way for us as a council to show that we do support our police department in many ways.
No, I appreciate that, Councilwoman. And you're absolutely right. I think some of it might be anecdotal. For instance, we could go now and tell you that I know that we found at least 2 missing people using a drone. So if we were to call it a search and rescue team, that would be bringing out dozens of people for hours at a time. We had another mission that's chasing somebody that was armed with a gun. We had about 20 people out there. We decided to back off. Had we continued, that would have been easy 12, 14 hours of overtime for those 20 people and those agencies. So I think we can definitely take a look at those mission logs in the future. And then based on the type of mission and the outcome of that mission, you could start putting some numbers to that and give you an idea of how the benefit is and what that benefit would look like in terms of dollars.
That's excellent. Thank you very much, Jonathan. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Maybe that's something you could put in the police annual report, and just in terms of, it would be meaningful to our citizens, that we got roads open back up after a collision. If it's one of our arterial roads and it's closed for 4 hours for investigation, that can be pretty challenging to a lot of people. So there should be some other data you can grab other than anecdotal that we can see it in the annual report every year. Because I imagine these type of operations will grow over time.
Right. And I think you could also look at the number in terms of businesses, just 1/72. Imagine the impacts on commerce on shutting that down for 4 hours.
I congratulate you for finding new and innovative tools to make our department more effective and resourceful and safer for the officers. And so,
thank you.
Any other questions? Don has a question.
No, as a drone operator myself, I know the advantages that the city would have of this thing. The only thing my drone doesn't have is infrared, and that's the biggest concern I have for our law enforcement. When they're out searching for somebody with a canine dog in the dark, I mean, you can't see. You put that drone up there and at least the drone will tell you just by the heat sensors. And like you say, just the picture taken and the measurements and stuff that you can take from the pictures so fast with that camera. It is a benefit to the city way, but quite a big.
Well, and just to clarify, the drone that we own as a department does not have infrared, but through mutual aid, the drone that we do bring in, the big drone, it does have infrared, and it has found multiple people by using that technology. So.
And I have seen too other outfits that make these drones. They do list right on some of their websites that they do grants to law enforcement for these.
Yeah, we'd definitely be interested in the future, but I like to just baby step it. I think I wasn't convinced, and just a real quick story. I had a council member in the past ask me, why don't you just sit in your department and send out drones? And we gave on resources, and I found it so comical at the time, and now I probably owe that council person an apology, because it'll probably happen someday.
All right, thank you, Chief. So we'll move on to our next item, which is the review of the preliminary budget for 2021 and 2022. Kristen Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and good evening, members of council. On October 9th, we had a budget retreat where we had an opportunity to review and discuss the proposed 21-22 budget. The document in your packet is the final draft that will be made available to the public. State law requires that it's available to the public, and it has been published on our website, so the public can view that. There hasn't been any changes to the budget, with the exception of one item. The fire permit revenue that we talked about has been removed for the budget, so everything else has remained the same. So there's no changes that have been made. Just two items I want to note real quick. There is a typo on page 34. If you look on the police department, the FTE chart that I included in there, the police support officer in the budget will be added in 2022, but I inadvertently added that in the FTE chart on 2021. So I'll remove that and correct that for the final version that will be brought forward for your approval on the 16th of November. And then the other item I wanted to note is on page 21. That is the budget ordinance that council will be asked to take action on November 16th, along with the exhibits A through D. So that will be the official document that council will approve. Next Monday will be a public hearing, and there will be a brief presentation similar to the presentation on October 9th, which will provide an overview of the proposed 21 and 22 budget. And there will also be an opportunity for the public to make any comment on the budget. No action will be asked of council to be taken that evening. The budget ordinance will be brought forward on November 16th for action. And so I didn't want to go over to really in too much detail. We did discuss it pretty thoroughly on October 9th, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have up to this point.
Anybody have any questions on the budget? We did a pretty good thorough review at the budget retreat. Thank you, Kristen. And before you go, I just want to publicly give you the compliments for our clean audit today. I believe that's the 5th year in a row. And it was, I think we all felt a sense of pride hearing the auditor say about how great the record keeping and organization was with the city's finance department. So thank you to you and your staff.
Thank you very much. And I did thank my staff. They do a really good job. They're diligent, they're detailed, and work great with all the departments. It really takes all of us working together. So thank you for that. And yes, thanks to my staff.
I just took the steam out of Sarah's press release on it, sorry. But I wanted to publicly acknowledge it. Okay, so we'll move on to the next item, which is the resolution for the proposed 2021 general property tax levy.
Yes, so this is also a review. We did talk about this at the retreat on October 9th. There are two resolutions in your packet, and I just wanted to briefly talk about those. The first resolution is one that is required each year. That's the one that actually establishes the property tax levy. That resolution has to include any dollar amount or percentage increase that will be taken from the previous year. For the regular property tax levy, there is a proposed 2% increase. Again, as we talked about at the retreat, 1% of that would be 1% over what we levied last year, and the other 1% is taking the banked capacity of about 42,000. The second resolution is required because under state law, any government with a population of over 10,000 is limited to the limit factor of what they can levy. It's the lesser of the rate of inflation, or 1%. This doesn't happen very often. The last time it happened was in 2016, but in the event that the rate of inflation is less than 1%, then a substantial need resolution needs to be adopted. And all that really says is that there's a substantial need to take the 1%, and then that levy allows you to take the 1% instead of being limited to the 0.6% that the rate of inflation is currently. There will be a public hearing, again, as required by state law. We're required to hold a public hearing on our proposed property tax levy. That will happen next Monday on November 2nd. The public will have an opportunity to comment. Council will not be asked to take action. The resolutions will be brought forward November 16th, and council will be asked to take action at that time. The resolutions do have to be submitted to the county before the end of November. So if action isn't taken on November 16th, we'll need to squeeze in a special meeting before the end of the month to make sure we can get those to the county on time.
Marilyn has a question.
I did. I wanted to know on the banked capacity, the one that we banked, how long can that be banked?
Until such time council decides to take it.
So there's no like deadline or anything?
No.
I just have some concerns about a 2% increase as opposed to our normal 1%. And you know, times aren't real good right now, and we have some other issues coming up that will be involving a property tax increase for citizens. And so I'm just not sure if this is really necessary this time to use that banked capacity. And if we use it, I mean, I just worry that people are going to feel overloaded with because we're going to have the EMS levy as well, and then a 2% instead of a 1% tax increase, and then the approximately $60 a year increase on their property tax for the RFA, should the voters choose to do that. And if they're feeling overtaxed, they may choose not to do that. Of course, they'll end up paying through the ambulance utility fee anyway, but I just feel like it might be just a bit of a burden on people right now. That's it.
Thank you, Marilyn. Jessica had her hand up.
Yeah, I'm with Marilyn on that. And if I'm reading the reserve fund policies correctly, it looks like for the 2021 through 2022 budget, it's projecting the ending fund balance will represent more than 2 months in the reserve. So we're even projecting with our conservative budgeting that we're going to have more than we think. So I would like us to look at possibly not taking that 2% and banking it.
So just one point of clarification, in 2021, we are expecting to have a little bit more than 2 months, but we use almost $1 million of that between 21 and 22. So we get down to just about 1 month, 1.5 months. So we already are planning to use some of our reserves between 21 and 22. And so I just want to caution us, not knowing where the economy is going to go. If our sales tax revenues do take a decline at all, we'll need to consider that could impact our reserves even further. So that would just mean, I just want to point that out, that's a little bit of an uncertain revenue that we're not sure how it's going to play out the next year, and it does impact our fund balance quite a bit.
Marilyn had her hand up again.
So I just wanted to add that if we didn't take just the 1%, we just did 1%, not taking the entire thing would be okay with me too, but we would be able to readdress this next year for the 2022 budget, correct?
Meaning if you wanted to forego the banked capacity in 21, could we take it in 22?
Yes.
Yes.
And as well as increase another 1% should we be in a very good state then. Who knows where we'll be then. But I just think that this is the wrong time for this. So I'll leave it at that.
Present back to us what it would look like in the budget if we just did the 1% this year, and then, and projected whether we'd have to address the bank capacity next year when we did the resolutions for the property tax study.
Mm-hmm.
Once we know if the RFA passes or not, we'll know that in February. And so that kind of sheds a different light on everything. I think we'll have a different set of revenue for the city, and it'll just be a whole different picture. And who knows what might affect it. But
we'll get an idea next year what our sales tax revenues will look like from the COVID. So we're trying to be very cautious.
And correct. Once we set the property tax levy for 21, we cannot change 2021. So just know that we're setting that now, and it can't be changed regardless of what happens with our other revenues early next year.
Mike just put his hand up.
Yeah, I had very similar thoughts to Jessica and Marilyn on this issue. I was wondering when estimating the revenues for this next biennial, were you estimating were you considering the 2% banked, or the total 2% with the banked amount when you figured those revenues? I think it must have been.
Yes, the preliminary budget that we reviewed with council on October 9th did include both the bank capacity and the 1%, correct?
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure I was clear on that. But yeah, I do have similar concerns that Marilyn has expressed on this. Just a concern. So I'm glad we're having the discussion.
Deborah and then Michelle.
Thank you. My thinking, I'm trying to think strategically of what is going to more positively affect our budget in the long term. And so I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kristen and Paul and Jessica and Marilyn, because you guys have worked on this so much, but the RFA seems like it would be really key that we need to think through getting this passed and how it will positively affect the city budget in the long run. So that I'm tending to think, go with just the 1% rather than the 2%. But so if we just go with the 1%, that's general fund money, correct?
Correct.
So what in the general fund would not be able to spend almost $43,000? Who's going to be said no to? So is that a drone and training? Is it, I'm just trying to think what's in our general fund sections that is going to have to go without, because you can't just say, no, we don't want to pay the money.
You're absolutely right, Deborah, if we have to offset an expense with, when we take a revenue away, it's not an enormous amount of money. So we're either going to offset it by taking some expense out of the budget, or we're going to be that much deeper into our reserve fund.
Yeah.
So we can do this for 2021 and defer this, but it's something that's probably going to come back up in 2022 for consideration, because that's if we do dip low on our sales tax revenues as predicted, we're going to need to generate revenue where we can to keep the service level where it's at.
And Paul, am I thinking correctly though about the strategy of the RFA and that being a positive in the long run for the city budget?
It is a positive for the city budget and for the fire department, creating a stable funding source for fire and EMS.
Which won't be realized till 2022. That won't be realized in 2021.
Right. One other thing I want to say to my fellow council people, I think Marilyn and I are the only ones that are still on council that voted for that budget with $75. And so when I hear talk about, oh, we got 2.5 months in the reserves, or, you know, that makes me nervous, because I came into a time when there was no money there because they weren't real careful or whatever. You know, the recession was the recession, but I just don't want to see us thinking, oh, well, we can just dip into this or use that because there's a little bit of extra there. I'm totally against that type of thinking. I think that our reserves should be more like 3 months. So I just want to put that out there as a person who voted for a budget that only had $75 in it. So
In the reserve fund.
Yeah.
There was more than $75 in the budget.
In the reserve, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Michelle?
Actually, so first of all, Mike, that was a really good question, because I had the same concerns when I read this, but I hadn't thought about whether this 2% was already calculated in. So thank you for asking that. But I think it's a tough year for 2. And I think if we ask a lot of people, which we're going to be doing in our community, you might just get to the point where nobody wants to say yes. And I think with the potential vote that we have coming up, I think that's very important in February. And doing a 2%, or I don't know, even 1%, just because it's because of COVID and because of the hardships people are experiencing this year. I just think it's a very difficult time. And I understand that we need to have reserves, and I understand budget, and I get that. But I also get understand the impact it could have in our community too. And 1% here, 2% there, approve this, vote. It all adds up for people that are already having a challenging financial hardship year. That's my 2 cents on the 2%.
Dawn? And then I'll ask Jan if she has anything, and that'll cover everybody.
Yeah. No, I agree with the other council members that the 2%, I think with us trying for the RFA, I mean, if we want this RFA to succeed, I think we're going to have to try to drop that down to the 1%, because it's just, I think the voters are going to vote it away from it. Because they're going to feel the overburden, especially like everybody says, the economy, a lot of people still not working. Some of them still not even getting unemployment checks, it sounds like. But yeah, no, I think we should try, if anything possible, to keep it just down to the 1%.
Jan, do you want anything to the discussion?
I keep thinking, because, we're in such different times, and I understand exactly what everyone's talking about. And with the RFA actually, if it passes, our taxpayers will be paying $60 more, but they've been paying $15 a month for the EMS levy. So it's going to be better there. I guess right now I would say I would be more in favor of just going with the 1% instead of the 2. And then if we need to this time next year, we can take the bank capacity.
So why don't we do this, Kristen? Why don't you, if you wouldn't mind, prepare a report for the council of what that would, how that would impact, what happens to that 42,000, where does it get taken out of the budget, so they're fully aware, and then bring back that budget for them to look at next week.
Okay.
Okay. Right. Thank you, everyone. Michelle?
Sorry. So, Kristen, it never expires?
As far as I know, it doesn't have an expiration date. It's just held until you decide to take it, and then you have to include that in the resolution.
Okay, thank you.
Now we'll do the resolution for the proposed 2021 EMS tax levy.
Yes, so this is similar to the previous item. We're required to adopt a resolution separately for the EMS tax levy. So again, the same two resolutions. The first states the dollar amount of any increases. And in this one, there is no bank capacity. It's just the 1% over last year's levy. And then because the rate of inflation is less than 1%, we need to do the substantial need. So it's the exact two same resolutions. It's just in the context of the EMS tax levy. And there will be a public hearing next Monday on this as well. And then the resolutions will be brought forward to council to take action on the 16th.
I was wondering on the amount, when we calculated everything for the RFA and we calculated the amount of our EMS levy, did we factor in that we would be increasing it this year, or was that just left as it is for 2020?
So I'm not sure I understand your question. The budget does include the 1% increase in the tax levy that you reviewed on the 9th?
Our budget does, but
Yes.
in the information that we did for our spreadsheet for the RFA, when it gave the property tax and then the EMS levy amount, what was that amount? Was it a higher amount than it is now, or was it?
I'm still not sure I understand the question.
Let me see if I can help. I think what Marilyn's asking is when you did the financial analysis for the RFA to see what revenues would look like combined, were you doing the 2021 EMS levy rate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this increase would already be calculated into the RFA fees, the data.
Yes, projected. I mean, the RFA levy rates will be at whatever the assessed valuation of the levy is at the time that it goes through. So the best projections at this time.
Okay. I'm just worried about too many different tax increases coming to people, and they're saying, you told me one thing one time and now it's more. So I would want to avoid that.
Of course, our EMS levy, if the annexation is successful, the city's EMS levy would go away and it would be the RFA's EMS levy.
Exactly, but there's, okay, so complicated.
It's very complicated.
I just want to make sure people get a straight picture of it. It's hard enough for us to get a straight picture of it, and we've been living and breathing this. I can imagine when people start looking at this, I just don't want them to think they're getting taxed from every angle here. So I would like the RFA to be successful. Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Everybody else okay with the EMS levy? Jessica.
Yeah, I'm kind of confused too, because I don't remember us talking in the RFA discussions about raising the EMS before.
Right.
I thought they were accepting the rate we were at, because going to a higher rate right now and then in February asking for them to be willing to raise it, I just don't think that's very strategic.
So we're not actually increasing the levy rate. So what this is doing is it's asking to take 1% of the amount that we levied last year. So how we determine the levy rate is the levy rate actually goes down. Right now it's 33 cents per 100 or per thousand. I'm projecting the levy rate will be at 32 cents next year. So we're not increasing the levy rate. That is a function of whatever the individual's assessed valuation is versus all the taxing districts, what revenue that they're requesting. So I don't want to confuse saying that we're increasing the levy rate like we would if we did an EMS levy lid lift. That truly is increasing the levy rate. We're asking for 10,000 more than what we levied last year.
Well, this is probably a good thing then, because it's not a whole lot of money, yet it covers it in case the RFA doesn't pass. I guess we'd still have the this covered.
That's true, and you're also budgeting for, this is budgeting for 2021. If the RFA annexation passes, the tax collection for that begins in 2022. You still have to fund fire and EMS for 2021 out of city revenues.
Right.
Correct.
Okay, I get it now. Thank you.
People don't understand their property taxes. It's very convoluted and complicated.
It is.
All right, good. Is that everybody's questions? Thank you, Kristen.
Okay, thank you.
So our next item is going to be a update on our moratorium for special events. Steve Peichel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Can you all hear me okay? All right. This is really more informational for the council at this point in time. I know Sarah is on the call, so she's able to answer any specific questions you might have about the event. As we reviewed this internally, it became apparent that there really wasn't anything for the council to do with respect to this this matter. You know that special events permits come to the city staff on a fairly regular basis. Unless there's an issue relating to a road closure, council normally doesn't find out about those other than when there's a road closure or something that requires council action. When you passed your resolution back in June of this year, your language that was used was fairly specific, and fortunately, I think it anticipated what has happened. Recently, the governor relaxed some of the requirements with respect to gatherings of this nature, and so now some of these events can go forward without really extraordinary measures. When you passed your ordinance before, the language of the resolution directed that the city staff not process applications for special events permits when such an application would be contrary to the Washington State Safe Start, Stay Healthy proclamation or any subsequent proclamations. And so there's really not a need for you to do anything to specifically approve this event or to change that moratorium. We're just bringing it to the council so you're aware that we will be processing this one and that it's consistent with the governor's requirements, and that's why it's being processed at this point in time. So I know that Sarah is available to answer any questions that you may have about the specific event, and of course I'm available to answer any other questions council may have.
On our screen.
You should be.
There you are. Sarah, you're muted. Did you want to go over anything with the event to the council?
If the council has questions. Carolyn?
I don't really have any questions. I just read over everything. It looks like these people really followed every single rule and filled everything out, and they have everything covered. It looked great to me. So I don't see a problem. And Steve explained it. So yeah, I don't have any problems with it.
Okay, we'll move forward and process his request.
We just want to express we appreciate how challenging that can be now when things can change on a daily or weekly basis to make sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed in these. Appreciate it. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Okay. So next item is the RFA document discussion. Oh.
Thank you, Mayor. This is the continuation of the discussion we've been having on the RFA planning document. We talked about it a couple of weeks ago and went through most of the aspects of it. Council's been updated on this since the beginning of the year. as the committee has worked their way through these issues. So far there hasn't been anything that's been new information on the review. The last couple items I want to go over tonight with council has to do with the city's financial responsibilities and liabilities to the RFA. So if the annexation is successful, the city will have two financial contributions that it'll need to make to the RFA. The first one is the city's portion of employee liability. At the time of the annexation, we will have to deposit some money into the RFA to cover the leave balances that are in that we carry for the fire and EMS personnel. We'll talk about that more as we go through this. And then the city's portion of the reserve funds needed for cash flow and mandatory reserve for the RFA. During the committee planning, the RFA committee looked at about 8 different financing models for this, with the goal of timing these contributions so that it worked for the RFA, meaning the RFA needs these funds to be able to carry their operations in between receiving property tax. And at the same time, we wanted to time this so that it didn't have an adverse effect on the city's cash flow. The employee liability. So the city will have to make a deposit equal to the amount of the leave balance per the collective bargaining agreement as of July 31st of 2021. So if the annexation vote in February is successful, the RFA would assume our fire department on August 1st of 2021. And so on July 31st of 2021, the city would have, that would be the end of our liability when it has to deal with the leave balances. We're estimating that right now to be $596,304, and it would be paid on or before December 31st, 2021. So we have a year basically to make those deposits. The next contribution is the reserve fund contribution. The city's portion of the reserve fund for the RFA would be $2.6 million. And there's 3 different mechanisms to that to make that $2.6 million. The first would be a cash deposit of $1 million paid to the RFA on or before May 31st, 2022. So we're talking about out a little bit on that. $1 million in equipment value transferred to the RFA upon annexation. So that's our rolling stock and the equipment that will transfer from the city to the RFA. And the third component would be to retain debt on Fire Station 48 for 2 years to make up the difference. So just to summarize that, for the liabilities for the city, we have the $596,304 that's our employee liability. So that has to do with our leave balances for fire and EMS personnel. When any employee leaves the city, we have some obligation to pay them for unused vacation and sick leave in accordance to the bargaining agreement of which they are under. So that covers that piece of it for the fire and EMS personnel. We have the $1 million in equipment value. So that's our rolling stock, our fire trucks, and all the equipment associated with that would be transferred to the RFA. So it would become their property. And then we have $1 million that we would pay in cash to them on or before May 31st, 2022. And then the balance of 696,000 that would be 2 years of debt on Fire Station 48. The reason for that, the way we put that together, is it just spreads it out and it makes it palatable for Arlington so that our cash flows stay in a positive. But we're providing it incrementally so that North County has the funds they need to make their obligations and continue their cash flow in a positive direction. Jessica.
Thanks, Paul. I know none of this is new information. We've gone over those numbers many times and tried to figure out how to balance it as best as possible. So I appreciate you bringing all the different options. My question was just to verify none of these options have been written into the budget that we're approving, correct?
Well, they have. This is the option that we landed on out of the committee. So these are we did budget for this.
So which option was budgeted?
This is the option.
Just
I'm
the
not quite sure I understand which option.
So
all of it isn't an option. There are components of the option that we worked through with the RFA committee.
So the different amounts that we originally were discussing in the committee, that it would either be this amount, that would be the payout, or this amount, those are gone now, and now you just have the amounts and you're just giving us the breakdown?
Yeah, what we did is we as we walked through this, we kind of narrowed it down to which option, the timing on paying it, that best worked with the cash flow for both North County and for the city. So this option that I presented tonight was the option that worked best for both the city of Arlington and the fire authority. So the dollar amounts didn't change. The $2.6 million for reserve fund was consistent, and the employee liability was consistent. It was just a matter of timing when we paid those out.
Well, my understanding was some of it was about whether we handed off the building, right? Because we talked both ways about whether we wanted to hold on to the building and then possibly use it for a different city office because it's not necessarily the best station, especially in the growth. And then
that's Station 46, and that's what we did when we talked about this as we've been moving through it. We had talked about Station 46. The RFA will use Station 46 as a fire station until a time when they have a fire station to replace it. Then that building will revert back to the city. The city will never lose title to that. We're basically leasing it to the RFA. They're covering the cost of maintenance and utilities and upkeep and those things during the time they use it, and then it'll revert back to the city. The discussion on the fire station timing as far as turning title over to it was with Station 48. If we paid the RFA the cash value up front, in addition to the $1 million, if we paid them the other $600,000 in cash up front, we would turn title to Station 48 over to the RFA right away. It's more of a logistics on the debt service on it. In this scenario, we hold the debt on Station 48 for 2 years. That gives us just an ability to be able to make 2 years worth of payments rather than coming up with the cash all up front. But as a logistical reason, we would retain title of that for that fire station for the first 2 years because we would continue the debt to have the debt service on it before it would transfer to the RFA. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so 48 wasn't one we wanted to hold on to. It was 46, right? That's downtown.
46, yeah. 46 is not a good fire station. So the value of it for us as a building is greater than the value of it being a fire station. So it's more cost effective for both us and the RFA if we keep title to that building and allow them to use it. until they get a different fire station.
And I believe the other balance amount that we were discussing the options on was the retirement payout, whether we wanted to just manage that ourselves. Was that even allowed versus just paying our projection of what the total payout would be to the RFA for them to manage?
Well, there's two, I think maybe there's two different scenarios here that you're thinking of, Jessica. And first is the employee liability. So the $596,000 in employee liability covers, we're just paying the RFA for the leave balances that will be in effect July 31st of 2021 when the RFA assumes our fire and EMS. So that's one aspect, and paying that to the RFA, and then the RFA manages it. So years down the road when or 2 days after the annexation, when somebody retires or separates from the organization, the RFA has been paid for the liabilities that we own as the city. So that's one aspect. I think what you're referring to is there's another, and that's we have some left one retirees that are under a different medical coverage than what we're normally used to with the left two and the PERS two retirees. So we have some ongoing medical expense liabilities with the left one that we'll still retain. So that there'll still be some liability there that we retain. It's not a growing. We have a finite number of people that are in that, and we have no more left one employees that are employed with the city. So there won't be any additional to that group, but we'll need to retain that and manage that for the foreseeable future.
So the lead payouts, then those are something we've been collecting on. So this is money that needs to be transferred anyway, because it wouldn't be under our
collect on it. This is money that we're obligated. This is the value of when an employee separates from the city, there is amount of their leave, depending on how much vacation they have and sick leave they have in a bank that they haven't used. They're entitled to a payout for that. And so we have to keep that liability on our books. And when we transfer those employees to North County, we'll be transferring that liability with them. And so this just makes North County whole on that liability.
Okay, that makes more sense because we're the one who signed the contract and promised those things. So we're the ones who need to follow through. Okay.
And then anything that they accrue after August 1st, 2021, meaning as they bank leave, then that'll be the liability of North County.
Okay, thank you.
Jan, I think you were next.
Okay. The fire department and EMS both have been paying into the equipment replacement fund. Can we use any of the money that they have paid in specifically to help pay off that 1 million in cash?
Yeah, that's where it will be. It will come. A portion of that will come out. Yes.
Okay.
Will come
Thank
out
you.
of that fund. Marilyn?
I just wanted to, I guess, clarify that the $696,478 that we'll be paying for Station 48 for the first 2 years, that comes out of the bond money that we already have. Is that correct?
No, those will be debt payments on the bond money
Right.
that we.
Yeah. And then what happens to the bond? Is that just going to, do we somehow turn that over to
Transfers assumes at the end of the 2 years, the RFA assumes that, so it transfers to them. It's paid off by them. They will assume that debt in one manner or another.
Okay, I just wasn't sure how that actually, technically took place. Thank you.
Mike?
Yeah, I haven't been part of these discussions, so I'm largely in the dark, except for having gone over the document very briefly. But am I correct anywhere near the ballpark if I make a statement such as, in order to enter into this RFA agreement that's going to cost the city about a little over $3 million over the next couple of years? Am I anywhere near the ballpark on that number?
That's, yeah, in liabilities that we have to cover, yeah.
Okay. So that's our cost to the city for entering the RFA then. Okay, thank you.
Deborah?
Well, to follow up on that question with Mike, but that's not a cost above and beyond, is it? Because that's what we would be spending, that or more, in having a police or fire department, right? Or
Well, yeah, part of it's liability. We carry that liability for the employee leave on our books no matter what. If if an employee leaves between now and then, somebody retires or moves on, we're going to pay out their leave balance according to the collective bargaining agreement. That is just a liability that we have. Kristen and I try our best to budget for that. We anticipate what we can, but it is a liability that we carry on our books. The reserve fund portion, the $2.6 million, unfortunately, because we're a municipality, we have a reserve fund that covers the whole city operations. We don't have a separate one for the fire department. North County Regional Fire Authority has, of course, a reserve fund. Their reserve fund is very critical to their budgeting because they have a mandatory reserve fund, but they also rely primarily on property tax as their revenue stream, which is only twice a year. So part of their budgeting strategy is cash flow because they need to make sure that, of course, they have enough operating funds to be able to go between property tax payments. And so that's part of what we're contributing there, is the funding needed to be able to sustain the organization between property tax collections.
Would come from property tax we collected the previous year.
Yeah.
And we would normally use it that next year for that.
right. I have a question, and you don't really need to answer it now because it's a little bit off of this. But as I went over the RFA presentation for the budget retreat, and the page that has the graph for the estimated cost to taxpayer annexation scenario, and it's 2020, 2021, 2022, no annexation, and then 2022 with annexation. And I was just curious, at sometime in the next couple weeks, as we're discussing budget, the 2022 no annexation, what I'm curious of is, with the numbers that are there, it's like $1.29 for city general levy. And then this city EMS levy drops down to 30 cents. And the subtotal is $1.59, $360 per year, which is $30 a month. Annual cost for a home of $400,000 is $996. I'm curious if that is a sustainable number for, say if the RFA does not go through, are those numbers going to sustain the fire EMS for the next 10 years? Or what I would be curious to know is, if not, then how much will the city have to increase taxes or the ambulance utility fee to be sustainable, say, until 2030? So I don't expect those numbers tonight, but I would like to know those sometime in the semi-near future, so that as people are deciding yes or no towards the RFA, that they get a true sense of, if they're looking at, oh, well, $60 more a year if I vote yes for the RFA, but if they vote no, maybe it's going to cost them more like $100 a year to stay in the city. So I would like to know how sustainable those numbers are.
We can put some projections together on that. This goes back to the discussion we had when we formed the Ambient utility fee.
Yeah.
You know, we started out at a rate that would get us by, but as we saw when we modeled it out for 10 years, costs increase, and so revenue has to increase to keep up with it. And you can see here that we've hit the first benchmark in 2020 that if we continue on the path we're on and we continue with the municipal fire and EMS service funded by the ambient utility fee, that we're seeing our first increase.
Yeah, and I think it's time that we see that so that citizens can make a real clear decision on how they want to pay for it. And because one way or the other, it has to be paid for. I don't want to see it go backwards to where it's always in the red. So anyway, that's why I'm asking for that, just to help citizens be able to make a good decision in the coming months. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else on that? Sorry, Mayor, that was probably your job.
That's okay. Why don't you just take it right into the next item? I think that's yours too, is the interlocal agreement with North County Regional Fire Authority regarding the annexation expenses.
Well, as long as we're talking about RFA, this one's a little bit simpler. North County Regional Fire Authority has put together an ILA. This is something we've been talking about, but we're just formalizing it to help pay the expenses that were accruing from the discussion and the work on the RFA. So we've verbally been talking about this for some time. Is North County assisting with those costs? They created this RFA, or excuse me, this ILA for shared costs associated with the proposed annexation. This would include some legal fees. We don't have a number on that, as you can see in the cab. Some professional service contracts for assistance with the RFA. That's Karen Reed Consulting, who's been our facilitator, and Liz Loomis, Public Affairs, who's helping us with some educational material. We also know that there'll be some excise tax liabilities on transferring of rolling stock and the election costs. So basically what this is North County's offering to split those costs with us in this cost sharing ILA. So it's actually a positive for the city.
Do you have any questions or comments for Paul on that? If we do the ILA, will we still see this as a budget amendment at the end of the year?
It will be in our budget amendments at the end of the year, yes.
Okay, no questions or comments? We'll move on to the next item then, which is the revision to the City Council Rules of Procedures and Code of Ethics. Steve Pfeiffer and Paul Ellis.
So we talked about this a little bit at our last workshop 2 weeks ago, and what I did was I met with Steve and with the notes that I took from the workshop, I tried to make adjustments to this remote attendance policy that reflected what I heard. So I'll just, kind of hit the highlights of what I heard from council, and we're certainly open to discussion and making any adjustments council sees. So what I heard was this policy would be administered by the city administrator. So council members who requested to have remote access would do so in writing to the city administrator and the city clerk. It'd be subject to whether we had the technical proficiency to remote in and the staff available to do that. We are limited on a technical level to no more than 2 council members at a time to remote in. That would be the maximum in a normal meeting that our IT department would be able to handle. What I heard was council members remote attendance would be limited to 4 times a year, no more than 3 consecutive meetings. I guess I already repeated myself on that. It would be required to have video conferencing, and that we'd have to have the technology available to be able to do it. The last item is that, of course, the exception is that if there is a state proclamation similar to what we're working under right now for open public meetings, or that the council wanted to modify this to extend it to any other modifications that came up. So that's kind of the quick version. I'm happy to answer any questions on. Jan?
I had one. So when we're all meeting together again and someone wants to do video, and say Brian is the person who has to come in and get it set up and stay during the meetings and stuff, how much does that cost us? I mean, we are paying him extra for staying hours later, aren't we?
It depends on who it is, because, yeah, Brian's is a salaried employee, so in that case, no, but it is extra hours, and if we had to pay an employee to do it, there would be an extra expense there.
Yeah, that was what I was wondering, because I was looking at how many times they could do it and figuring, and if he's spending, let's just say, several council people did it, and they can do it 4 times a year, that would, I mean, I know he's been doing it since March now, and I'm certainly hoping that he's getting some time off somewhere because of all the extra time, but that was what I was a little concerned about, was having to have a city employee have to come and spend extra hours, and with as many times that you can do it a year was my concern.
It'll be like Zoom, Jan, and we get better at it as we utilize it. However, we still do have IT here in the room to support that nothing goes down. But I think that opens it up to the last thing Paul mentioned, that we could come back and revisit this if sometime it became burdensome or not cost effective, you know, or was challenging for the staff. I think the council would be open to listening to that.
Okay. Thank you.
Deborah?
Thank you for putting this together. I think you did a great job, and I know I initiated it pre-COVID, believe it or not. I guess I'm prophetic in some ways. Oh dear. But I know for me, it would have been very helpful, because there were times when I was trying to get to a conference for the city and not able to travel with the group and do it on my own the next day so I could be at a council meeting. So I know it would be helpful to council people that we're trying to work for the city in several different scenarios. And so I just think it would be very beneficial in the long run and helpful for the council, but also for the staff that are working with us on special conferences that we attend and whatnot. So, and I like the way you put it together, and that it'll be administrated by the administrator and the city clerk. I think that's a great way to do it. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Marilyn?
I would agree. When I read it, I thought it was very well crafted, and it just kind of captures what we had suggested. So, and like the mayor pointed out, we can change this if it doesn't work. So I think if anything, we got something positive from this pandemic, in that we can all Zoom now. And if it helps have a full council meeting each time, if somebody has to be out, I think it's a great thing. So I support it.
Michelle, did you have your hand up?
Yes. I agree with everything on here. I just have a question. Do we want to, in section B, where it says no more than 4 times a year, do we want to say recommended no more than 4 times a year, just in case someone's ill, can't walk, or, I mean, has surgery? I don't know. I'm okay with the way it is, but I was just wondering if you wanted to leave it a little bit more open, and just say recommended no more than 4 times a year instead of no more than 4 times a year.
We tried to address that in the section I by allowing council to make adjustments to it. So if you got somebody who was on a long-term illness, or there was some other reason why they couldn't make the council meetings, or needed to exceed the 4 times a year, that was something council could take action on and approve, that kind of a change. It just seemed to be a simple, we wanted to keep it as simple as possible so it didn't get too complex.
All right.
So that was the thought that Steve and I put into it.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay. Thank you, Steve and Paul, for putting together what the council requested. So our next item is the ordinance for the floodplain regulations for chapter 20.64 of the AMC. Mark Hayes.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council. So as you may recall, back in May, you approved an emergency ordinance approving these changes, these revisions to this chapter of the AMC. And so that expired, or is expiring the 9th of this upcoming month in November. And so we need to have the permanent adopting ordinance approved in order to meet our obligation to FEMA and stay on the rate insurance.
Nothing's changed over the temporary revisions that we approved.
Same language, just this is the permanent adopting ordinance and not the emergency.
Have any questions for Mark? Okay. Somehow I didn't think nobody would want to get into discussion on that with you.
Imagine that.
I know. Okay, so we'll move into our final item this evening, which is the CED Development Monthly Report.
So I apologize. One of these days I will get pretty pictures with my report to come up here. I do have a few here that I could share if you have questions on them though. But so a few things have happened. We've been extremely busy with projects that are underway, and they keep coming in the door. So one thing that we did under the staffing report here is we had the opportunity to have a course from WCIA called The Foundations of Implicit Bias. And this was a very interesting course that we went to. And it was quite interactive. You had no choice but to interact with breakout groups. And it really made you think and question about all conversations, the way you perceive things, just everything that occurs in your life. And have to really focus on that and address it to make sure that you are looking at things in an unbiased manner. And so it was really, we had some great conversations after the course was over in the office. And it was pretty interesting, some things that are done just because you've done them that way for years and years and years. No malice or intent involved in this at all, but it's just habit basically. And so it was kind of interesting to watch those come out with different people and just to see the reactions, including myself, to say, I didn't realize I did that. So a great eye opener. Anyways, we ended up with all the materials from that course. So if anyone's interested in it, we could definitely share that with them. Just going through, I've not received anything from council yet on the housing action plan. And so that's starting to wrap up. I need to get comments together in order to get the final draft created for the final document to move forward through public process. So if anybody has any comments or questions about that, I definitely would love to hear that from council.
Do you want those in writing? Because I know I've given you comments in person on it. Yeah. Okay.
Writing's good. It helps me remember what the comment was, but that could be in an email. It could be a phone conversation where I can take notes of it. But definitely, if you have comments regarding the plan, now would be the time to speak your piece. So. Next item here of some of importance. And I know I've expressed this to a few of you in conversations, but it's really becoming obvious that Zoom meetings are great for sharing information, but it does not provide for that face-to-face conversation, and you lose something in a Zoom meeting, or you can't really express or feel the intent of the conversation itself. So just one of those things that we're looking for ways to try and incorporate face-to-face meetings with people in a safe environment. So I really I cherish the time that I get to spend on one-on-one conversations with council and the public. So we keep looking at ways to be able to do this and to have a larger venue and still meet our requirements for social distancing. So just some thoughts as I was going through the monthly reports and some of the things that we've done in the GIMS. The long-awaited Roxy project has come through.
Mark, you do have screen sharing capability now in case you have pretty pictures you want to put up.
Oh.
You do have now screen sharing capabilities.
Okay, thank you. So I would bring Roxy up, but it's really not a building that's quite ready to be shared. I don't believe, but it is a rather large building. So if you look at this, it's almost 3 million square feet in one single building. It will be a large landmark for Arlington when this gets constructed. So we're working with them right now on design review, and so we're being pretty adamant about what we would like this building to look like, and it's interesting working with a larger corporation with doing design review. So I'll keep you informed as to how that's moving along.
Mark?
Oh, yes.
I just wanted to say, I YouTube watched the Planning Commission meeting last week. Sorry, the days are flying by. And would you please tell your Planning Commission that I really appreciated hearing their kind of thinking how they're going to work with this large corporation about that building. They weren't saying no to the building, which I was very glad to hear, but they were talking about the importance of the design review and the importance of the look of this building being the gateway into our city's industrial center. So it helped me to feel confident in our planning commission that they have the vision of the council as they're thinking this through. And so I want to say thank you. And if you would please pass that along to your commission for me, I would appreciate that. So
I will certainly do that, Deborah. Thank you very much.
I agree, Deborah.
Thank
I
you.
also watched it too, and I agree with you. That it was nice to hear them with them comments.
Great. I'm glad people are watching the Planning Commission. It's great. So you kind of see what we're facing with the building after you saw the renderings on the channel. So
Mike also has his hand up.
Oh.
Yeah, when I hear about having such a large building, it does harken back to the form-based code days, and and human scale, that when you're dealing with a building of such scale, that I think these become paramount issues to contend with in dealing with that. That's just a comment I'm just making concerning this one particular building. I too listened into that meeting.
Great, appreciate that. Yeah, human scale with a building that's 100 feet tall. It actually lends itself to some of the things we've been working with them on, that with the parking and how to push the building back so it does become more human scale, as opposed to our mixed use and the form-based code where we're right out on the right of way. So that in itself will help with the scale of this building for sure. So. The next thing was on the, another GIM we had was on the high school. And that was with the levy, with the money for the 2020 or 2021 levy or 2020 levy. They represented the addition and the remodeling of the high school building. And it's, it actually is pretty attractive. We're waiting for better renderings to come through, but we did look at that. We had some concerns, of course, with thinking what this would generate in the way of traffic, but it really doesn't. That was already accommodated for during the original high school design and review process. They had already calculated in this additional classroom and student increase. So there was a zero effect from the remodel and the addition. One of the things everybody's familiar with, Unique Interiors over on 2nd Street in McLeod. So the building kind of covers 2nd Street, McLeod, and faces into the American Legion parking lot there. And so they are planning a remodel of that building on the McLeod side and on the Legion parking lot side. So, and the alleyway. So it'll cover all 3 of those sides that aren't done. The old truck shop will actually be raised and a new building constructed there because it just was not structurally feasible to try and save that building and do what they want to do. So let me see if I had that one up here. So I'll share this. Can you see the screen yet?
No.
Nope. Oops, that's the high school, sorry. Come on. Well, it's being obstinate. It does not want to open up for you.
You can always email it to us. Or people can look in last week's planning commission packet for it.
Yeah, can you see it now on the screen?
No.
Still isn't opening?
No, we see you.
That's unfortunate. How about now? Apparently not. Well, sorry about that. Yes, it's on the planning commission. I'll get together on put a thumb drive together for these projects that are coming up. So, and those are, I mean, I have like 5 other projects that are sitting here on the desk that have not made submittal yet, but we are in the works of those, and it's a mixture. It's residential and commercial and industrial. So it's a mixed bag here in the department lately. So we have quite a few things going on. Deborah?
One of the things listed is a 6-bed adult family home on 5th. and I'm familiar with the house that it is, and it seems like a small little rambler. I'm sure that the city has criteria and guidelines for people that are going to do a home like that. And is it that each adult would have their own bedroom? Because I can't see that as a 6-bedroom home, but.
Correct. So we have our criteria for review and zoning for that, but this is state controlled. So the state gives those guidelines. They have to follow the state guidelines. We review that and make sure that they're adhering to those. But it does, it's approved with the living space, kitchen space, all the common area, all of that is all by state of Washington.
Okay.
Department of Social and Health Services. So, yeah, and we told them at the time that we couldn't go more. They wanted to do an 8-bedroom, and we said that we wouldn't allow more than a 6-bedroom in this residential zone. So that's what they're moving forward with.
And do they have to upgrade a house so that everything is in good condition? Because that's it just looks a little run down, and I would hate to think of seniors, in kind of bad positions health-wise, being in a house that isn't the best situation. So.
Right. So everything has to be brought up to ADA standards. They get new restroom facilities. Bedrooms have to be demised so that they have private space. So the typical patient is usually dementia patients. Yeah. Patients or seniors that have memory loss, things like that. So.
Well, and so I'm assuming there has to be like safety measures for homes like that too, to keep those residents safe.
Correct. There are, I don't know whether this will trigger, if they're below the 8-bedroom, I don't know if it'll trigger the sprinkler systems or not, the residential sprinkler. That's something we have to look at with the state, but we'll look at that when the plans come through for review. Okay. Of the remodel.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other items of interest? One, I do want to bring one up. So we had a GIM on 6 lots that are on Olympic Avenue going up the hill. So I don't know if you're familiar with, I know it as Doe's house, which is up on the top of the hill. It'd be on the northwest corner of Union and Olympic. Really nice old home there. Well, they own all the lots that are to the north of that, all the way down to Abdo's dentist office. And so they came in and wanted to evaluate whether or not those lots are developable. And of course, we said, well, yeah, they are. I mean, they are legal parcels, but you really have to look at what your costs would be in trying to develop those, because it drops off pretty severely there. If anybody has ever gone in the alley behind Les Schwab's and looked at that hillside. But so anyways, it was just interesting to see that come forward. It is zoned residential in there. So if they wanted to try and do mixed use, they'd have to come in for a rezone of those parcels in order to do that. But just kind of an interesting general information meeting to kind of walk them through the process and what they could actually do with those properties if they have
Mark, do they have to, on hillsides like that, do we work with any engineers for the geology of a steep hillside like that?
Yes, yeah, they'd have to do a pretty extensive geotechnical analysis of the hillside.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Yeah, it would be difficult property to develop, but
parking would be interesting.
Yeah, that that's why we looked at, well, you could do understory parking, so they'd have to come in off the. Actually, there's an easement there in front of Les Schwab's that would allow for access in there. But if you had the homes facing Olympic itself, and you had to access and park underneath from the backside, that's about the only way you could make that feasible. So. So hopefully by next month, we'll have some more projects for you to look at, and I promise I will put together a slideshow for you to give you a little insight in what we're working
For
with.
visuals,
So,
so we love to see the visuals.
yeah, I know.
All right, thank you, Mark.
All right, thank you.
Do we have any administrative report this evening?
Nothing else this evening.
Okay, I have just a short mayor's report, just in case you're curious. I did get an email today from the county because I was asking them about the elections and election security, as I was getting some comments from residents wondering. And so the county's Emergency Coordination Center, which has been open since March and activated and staff actively working on it because of COVID-19. In June, they also began developing plans focused around coordinating responses to civil unrest. So there isn't any credible threats in Snohomish County or anything, that they know of solid, but the planning will be in place. The ECC will be open on election day and through the evening as they anticipate the vote tallies coming in from the state of Washington. That will be staffed there. They're also coordinating with public transit and public works agencies. And the county auditor, who manages the elections for Snohomish County, including here in Arlington, in light of national concerns about voter intimidation, has increased security around the county's 30 ballot drop boxes. And they're also working with a security contracting firm to assist with that. So I just kind of want to let you know they've been coordinating and communicating with local law enforcement too. And if any voters or citizens come to you with concerns or, vandalism or something to a ballot drop box, we just asking that they call 911 to report the activities or any voter intimidation at a ballot drop box. So, thought that'd be interesting to pass on to you. Okay, are there any comments from council members this evening? Jessica?
Comments are the same as reports, right? I always get that confused.
Yeah, it says comments from council members / council members reports, but I remember Councilmember Hobson specifically wanted me to say comments from council members, so I specifically say that.
Okay, so mine is the report. I've got the public safety meeting was last week, so I wanted to give you guys an update on a couple things. So for the police department, they reported on September, and they had overtime every day, and all but 6 days were considered understaffed. And that's even with the overtime. Also, they've been working on the professional standards, training, and accreditation. Just as a heads up, the amount of training hours Washington State already requires that we meet is enough to be considered professional trainers nationally. So just so you guys understand the high level of expectation of Washington State on our police. And then fire department, there has been an increase of overtime as well, primarily because of sick leave and medical leave. Also the part-time staffing, still no COVID cases, but it was the highest overtime month in 2020. As well as a report on the COVID-19 countywide relaxed 2 weeks ago, but they still do level 3 suit up as needed. And the COVID positive patient reports are not increasing. Like they get reports on how many of the patients they've actually transported that had COVID, and they said that number is not going up. And that's all I have.
Your COVID number not going up. Deborah?
I have a question for Jessica, and maybe if you probably don't know it, but let me know later, or let us know as a council. What was the month in 2019 that was the highest in overtime? Because I think it was October. I think there's a trend that every October is high overtime in both departments. So I just would be curious.
Okay, I'll check on that.
We'll look that up.
I keep an eye on these things.
Any other council comments slash reports this evening? Mike?
You're muted, Mike.
You're on mute.
Sorry. Yeah, I have a comment. In talking, when I listened to Chief Ventura a little bit ago, and I hear these statistics about all the stress that the police and fire are under, I know our budget's very, very tight these days, and this is I'm just throwing this out, so don't get excited. But I think it might be something that we might want to consider in that we hire either a behavioral specialist for the police department or a police psychologist. I've read up on this just a little bit, and it might be a useful position to have within our fire department. Now, I don't know, I know we're small, so this might be kind of expensive for us, but as I look into this a little bit, it seems like this is something that could be very useful for police departments, both in terms of dealing with the calls that they go on to help alleviate some of the situations that they run into, or even within the department themselves with the officers. And it's just a thought I'm going to throw out there that I've been entertaining recently. And I don't know if anybody else has thought at all about it or already dismissed it or not, but it's just something I wanted to throw out to the council to ruminate over.
Thank you.
I just wanted to reply because I agree. I think public safety, mental health is very important. And I know that one of the chaplains from Snohomish County, it was hired part-time on contract to do that role for the city of Marysville. And he was grant funded. So when the grant ran out, they don't have that position right now. But I agree with you and have talked to him about potentially if we could possibly do a part-time contract here. But that's something that the city leaders would need to decide on and get quotes on before we would discuss.
Thank you. All right. Michelle?
It's interesting because that's something that the legislative AWCA legislative committee talked about. The group of us, there were definitely people that were priority was number one, reforms, but there was just as many people that said we need to make sure that we're also supporting police officers and making sure that they have the resources. And like you said, Mike, some sort of, I'm not sure what the right word is, but counseling opportunities, and for it not to be a negative, but to be very highly encouraged. And so I thought that was really nice. And there is just as much support for officers knowing what they go through and the stress of the job. So I know that was under one of the priorities. Doesn't mean anything's going to happen, just like anything else, but I liked your suggestion also. And it's what we had thought about also on the committee. So locally, however we can get that done, I agree with that. I think that's a wonderful recommendation.
It'd be interesting to hear Chief Ventura's thoughts on that and Chief Kraski's thoughts. I will just remind the council that one thing that we could do, we did do at the beginning of this year, is we increased the employee assistance program, which is part of the insurance that they have that allows free counseling services. And before they were limited to 3 visits, and we increased it to the maximum of 8 with our insurance company. So we probably are looking for ways that we can make sure people who are in stressful frontline jobs have all of the support they need to continue to do that work for us and not have negative impacts on themselves and their families. So we didn't have any community members that wish to comment this evening. Oh, could we review the agenda for consent items for next week before we adjourn?
I also have a question. So were we going to discuss the flag stuff in 2 weeks then?
Sure when that's scheduled to come back, Jessica. I'll look for you and find out and let you know.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. All right. Are there any items that you guys see that readily lend themselves to consent items for you for next week? Maybe the floodplain ordinance?
Yes, 9. Now 5 won't be on there anyway, will it, Barb?
No, 5 will not be on there. 6 will not be on there. The discussion items won't be on there.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So the only other one I have a question about is the city as a public aircraft operator.
I'm okay with it being on there.
I think it should be on there.
Yeah, I do too.
On there being on the consent agenda or on the regular agenda?
Consent.
Okay, that's what I thought. Just verifying. Okay, so we have item number 1 and item number 9 will be on the consent agenda next week. Any objections to that? All right.
Okay, Madam Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Question?
Favor?
Aye.
Aye.